I once thought that the love between brothers was unconditional. But when I told my father, "I will kill you," my world shattered in an instant. At that moment, I not only lost respect for my father but also my confidence in myself. Chapter 20. That's a shitty way of saying, "I love you." I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I couldn't even look in the mirror. I couldn't stand looking at myself after saying what I had. I looked into the eyes of my own father and told him that I would kill him. What kind of monster am I? I sat in my room for what felt like weeks, but in reality it was only like 2 days. Eli heard about what had happened and came home this morning to make sure I was okay. He wasn't supposed to be home for nearly 2 weeks, but came back in only 2 days. I couldn't help but feel like crap. I didn't deserve a brother like Eli. "Please eat something," Eli pleaded, motioning toward the untouched plate of food that he brought to me nearly 2 hours ago. I shook my head, ignoring the groans from my stomach. "I'm not hungry," I mumbled, looking down at my hands in my lap. I chewed my poor nails down to nothing but stubs. I couldn't actually recall ever starting the habit. It was quite new to me, to be honest. Eli huffed, causing me to look up at him. He ran his hands down his tired face. He had driven all night just to get here and came to see me immediately. He didn't get any sleep. "Why don't you take a nap?" He looked up at me as if I were telling him he had 2 heads. "I'll sleep when you've eaten." I sighed and clenched my jaw. It angered me that Eli cared so much. It really shouldn't, but it made it very hard for me not to share a bond with him. I knew when Kieran, Marilyn, Bolton, and I left, leaving Eli would be one of the hardest parts. He was my brother, and the more time that I spent with him, the closer I felt toward him. "I'll eat if you go at least shower," I reasoned. Eli looked like a mess. He was obviously tired and struggled to keep his eyes open. The least he could do was take a shower to wake him up a little bit. Eli pondered the idea for a moment. He bit the inside of his cheek and quirked his left eyebrow slightly. "Eli," I swore quietly. After a moment, "Okay, I'll be back," he stated, standing up. "Eat, please." With that, he was out the door. I glanced over to the food sitting beside me. I gulped, feeling my body yearning for the food. I shook my head and got out of bed, pushing away my aches. I grabbed the plate from the side table. I shuffled my tired body into the connected bathroom. I stood over the toilet and just dropped the food into it. I immediately frowned, wishing I hadn't done it. I knew Eli would figure out what I had done somehow, and he would be so upset with me. I frowned, knowing Kieran would be angry at me for neglecting myself. He hated when I did that. All that Eli and the rest of my family wanted was for me to be okay. I really couldn't be. To my authentic 𝐊𝐢𝐳 heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I was torn between being with my shredder family and my real family. Both of them wanted me to be happy and safe, but I just couldn't be that when things were the way they were. I felt a tear slip from my eye as I thought about the conversation Alex and Grayson had last night. It wasn't hard to hear them. They were shouting at each other. It seemed like a usual routine for them. Grayson was shouting something to the effect of, "What about her safety?" Alex fired back with, "What about her sanity?" which in turn caused another uproar. They continued fighting for nearly after that. "Don't like eggs?" a voice asked from the doorway of the bathroom, making me jump. I snapped my head to the right to meet a pair of dark brown eyes staring at her. Her blonde hair was pulled back into a ponytail, which allowed me to see her clear, beautiful skin perfectly. I don't really either. But she paused, moving her hand to her stomach. "He does." My eyes grew a bit larger, taking in her slightly protruding stomach. "You're pregnant," I concluded. A smile graced her face as she nodded. I forced a smile onto mine. I wanted to be happy for her, but I honestly couldn't. She had everything: a mate, a pet, a baby. I couldn't help but be jealous. "How far along are you?" 2 months. I didn't reply. I didn't know what else to say. "Oh, well, I wouldn't exactly have chosen y'all to be my baby's father. But you do. No mate or not. I don't get how 𝐿𝐻𝐿𝐻 it didn't terrify of the beast boy." 𝐿𝐻𝐿𝐻 clapped her hands together and sighed. I'm 𝐿𝐤𝐬 by the way, she said, extending her hand out for me to shake. I looked at her hand, but didn't shake it. I'm Arden, or Grey, I said blankly as a frown made its way to my face. I don't really know which one anymore. 𝐿𝐤𝐬's smile faltered as she took a step toward me. I flinched slightly when she put her hand on my shoulder. She was trying to be comforting, but if anything it just made me feel uneasy. I think she noticed because she slowly removed her hand. Well, I just thought I would come up and get you. Dale was going to send Trevor up, but I wanted to meet you myself, she said comfortingly. I gulped and nodded, expecting her to start exiting the room, but she kept talking. You've been missed around here, Arden. I lifted my head up to look at her directly in the eyes. I was taken back a bit by her calling me Arden. No one here did that. She must have noticed the appreciation I had for her because she gave me a small smile. You came here as Arden. It's only fair that call you by what makes you happy. I didn't say anything else to 𝐿𝐤𝐬 after that. She gave me a moment to get ready to meet my brother once again. She sat on my bed as I got a quick shower and finished making myself look and smell normal. Well, look decent. I shyly walked out of the bathroom in a towel over to my closet. I still didn't even know what I owned in my closet. I can only assume Alex had someone stock my closet and dresser with clothing after I had arrived back. Wait. 𝐿𝐤𝐬𝐷𝐞𝐸 𝐊𝐤𝐬𝐷𝐞𝐝 Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing 𝐊𝐤𝐬𝐷𝐞𝐸 𝐿𝐤𝐬 said from beside me. She was holding out clothing to me with another comforting smile. I smiled back at her and took the clothes. I wandered back into the bathroom where I put them on. I was startled a bit by the shorts that 𝐿𝐤𝐬 had given me. The shirt was just a basic green tee shirt with the words "Wish you weren't here" on the top left of it, and the bra and underwear she had given me was similar to the undergarments that Marilyn would make me wear when I had walked back out to meet her. She explained that the shorts were Nike Pros. Honestly, I didn't think they were shorts that I should be wearing to talk to my brother. But she did. We walked out of my room together. Neither of us said anything. She just shot me a smile every once in a while. We were about to go down the hall to 𝐿𝐤𝐬's office when she walked down a different hallway which led to the stairs. Wait, aren't we going? I said, slowly pointing down the other hall to 𝐿𝐤𝐬's office. 𝐿𝐤𝐬 didn't even stop, let alone look back at me. You'll see, she stated as she continued walking down the hall. I furrowed my brows, not entirely understanding the situation. That soon changed when I realized where we were heading. Well, more like when 𝐿𝐤𝐬 started opening the door. We were at the training room. Whoops, 𝐿𝐤𝐬. I can't, no, I'm not. I stuttered as I began backing away. 𝐿𝐤𝐬 quickly grabbed my wrist, knowing I was just moments from bolting down the hall. I was panicking. They couldn't make me go back in there. I was not going to lose myself again. I was not going to kill someone just because my father didn't think I was capable of taking care of myself. I swear, 𝐿𝐤𝐬 said as her brown eyes bored into my grey eyes. I understood why 𝐿𝐤𝐬 was alpha female. She did an amazing job of keeping others calm in crazy situations. She was kind and patient. She was everything I wish I could be. I nodded numbly. She slowly opened the door and tugged my arm. I had no other option but to follow her. She had an iron grip on my wrist, and she was not letting go. I took one step into the room before it hit me, the scent hitting me like a brick wall, causing my wolf to hum. I lifted my eyes to meet the familiar green ones just across the room from me. My breath hitched, and I froze. I didn't know if I was dreaming or not. 𝐿𝐤𝐬's grip on my wrist loosened, giving me the opportunity to bolt. I was over to him in an instant. I ignored the tired look on his face as I jumped into his arms. I wrapped my legs around his waist and my arms wound around his neck. Tears fell from my eyes as I dug my face into his shoulder. 𝐿𝐤𝐬𝐷𝐞𝐸 𝐊𝐤𝐬𝐷𝐞𝐸 Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing 𝐊𝐤𝐬𝐷𝐞𝐸 I choked out, not knowing what else to say. His arms circled me, holding me against him. I didn't want to let go. 𝐿𝐤𝐬𝐷𝐞𝐸 𝐊𝐤𝐬𝐷𝐞𝐸 Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing 𝐊𝐤𝐬𝐷𝐞𝐸 I wasn't sure if people were talking. People could have been shouting for all I know, and I wouldn't have heard them. My wolf was humming wildly. I was crying out of sheer happiness, and I was entirely focused on the sound of Kieran's heartbeat. It wasn't until I was yanked away from Kieran did that stop. My wolf growled viciously in my head as I turned and stared at 𝐿𝐿𝐬. Why would he do that? I expected Kieran to growl, but he didn't. He just glared angrily at 𝐿𝐬 as tiredness was evident on his facial features. He had a black eye, and his nose looked crooked as ever. It made me want to cry seeing his beautiful face in such an unnatural way. Two men, one of them being Trevor, held onto Kieran's shoulders and pulled him back. I didn't like how they were trying to create distance between Kieran and I. It was then that I realized just how much Kieran didn't look like my Kieran. Purple bags lined his under eyes. His normally straight, menacing posture was now not existent. His body was dropping forward a bit, almost as if he couldn't hold himself up. The one thing that remained the same. 𝐊𝐢𝐳𝐳 𝐊𝐢𝐳𝐸𝐵 heartfelt thanks for your unfailing 𝐊𝐢𝐳𝐸𝐬𝐷𝐐𝐻 was his usual stoic face. The same stoic face that I couldn't help but want to kiss 𝐿𝐿𝐬. What did you do to him? I asked quietly, feeling my blood run cold at the thought of my brother beating my mate nearly to death. A little silver to shut his wolf down for a while. 𝐊𝐢𝐳𝐬𝐻 said. His jaw clenched. My wolf did not like the fact that they were forcing her mate's wolf away. She let out another growl, but this time a pain shot through my chest as she did so. It felt almost like someone kicked me in the chest. I sucked in a deep breath and stared up at Kieran. He watched me intensely with his dark green eyes. Not enough, my wolf said, making me confused. What? As usual. I did not get an answer. He'll be fine. Don't worry. He's just weak. 𝐿𝐬 stated, earning a chuckle from Trevor. Poor thing and barely stand. Trevor joked as he pushed Kieran forward a bit. Kieran tottered for a moment before gaining back his footing, making Trevor and the other man laugh. Kieran's teeth clenched. My eyes widened as I looked into his. They flashed red in the centers for just a second before going back to their beautiful, deep green color. Not enough, I thought to myself. His wolf is still there. They didn't give him enough. Why would you do that? I asked, 𝐿𝐬 trying to ignore the fact that I knew Kieran's wolf had survived through however much silver they flooded his system. I knew they'd take him away if they knew his wolf were still there. You said you only train with him, Grayson stated, walking into the training room with Alex. Her eyes landed on me. She smiled widely. So we gotta have him train you. Alex finished her mate's sentence. Her smile never left her face. I smiled widely at her. She actually did it. She got him to agree to it. Once, my father cut in. One chance to help you control your wolf. One chance to prove yourself. Gray. I nodded anxiously, not being able to contain my excitement. I won't let you down, I assured, staring into his grey eyes that we happened to share. He nodded and started walking back out of the room with Alex in tow. Grayson left, but Alex stopped at the door and turned to us. I'm trusting you with her, Alex said, staring directly at Kieran. Their eyes met, and for the first time I saw a different side of Alex. She held an intense gaze that could make even the strongest man want to hide. The scars that ran down her face seemed to come off as even more menacing in the moment as her bright blue eyes pierced into Kieran. Try anything, and I'll kill you myself. I've had to deal with worse than you before, and killing him was one of the best decisions of my life. Alex left the room with those being her last words. I stood frozen. Murderer. Hypocrite, my wolf said, recalling the time she called Kieran, Marilyn, and Bolton monsters for murdering people. I shook the thought from my mind as I turned back to 𝐿𝐬. Jamie and Dakota will be guarding the exits. Anna and Dustin will be standing outside. 𝐿𝐬 stated, looking at me before turning to Kieran. Anything bad happens, and they won't hesitate to rip you apart. I gulped, knowing that 𝐿𝐬 was dead serious. Why'd he have to be like this all the time? Kieran didn't say anything. He just continued glaring at 𝐿𝐬. But don't worry. 𝐿𝐬 kindly returned the gesture before leaving the room with Trevor following him. I couldn't help but wonder if the man that was just beside Trevor was Jamie or Dakota as he started walking over to the second exit. Had you been sleeping? Kieran asked startlingly. I watched him for a moment, feeling guilty. It was probably obvious that I was practically a zombie. He shouldn't be worrying about me. 𝐿𝐷𝐼𝐴𝐺𝐼𝐻𝐿𝐷 Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Yes, I lied. He looked skeptical before nodding. I don't think he believed me. But he didn't say anything, which I was pretty grateful for. Have you? He shot me a look that would have scared most people. But to me just reminded me of the Kieran that I knew before all of this. What do you think? Of course he wouldn't be sleeping. He's locked in a cell next to Bolton, who probably complains all night. And Marilyn, who probably does the same thing. I glanced back at the men guarding the exits. I clenched my teeth together, not feeling entirely comfortable talking to Kieran while they were standing there. I didn't like knowing they could hear everything that we were saying. I didn't feel safe. Can you guys stand outside? The brunette boy who was standing beside Trevor shook his head. No can do. Miss Hayes, he said, making me frown. Are you that bad at your job that you can't do it from behind a door? I shot out, but as soon as it left my lips, I realized that it wasn't my own thought. They were my wolf's words. I panicked slightly, not really understanding how her thoughts were slipping past my mouth without even taking over me entirely. The man rolled his eyes and looked over to the other guy. The other guy shook his head, making Brunette look back at me. Alpha's orders. I groaned and crossed my arms, narrowing my eyes at them. I could feel my wolf's anger coming over me. And my words were coming out like vomit. You really wouldn't want me telling my mother that my guards wouldn't even respect my wishes, would you? I don't think she'd be happy about that. Yeah. It was a low blow. But the looks on their faces made it worth it. It was obvious they were terrified of Alex. Who wouldn't be? Everything from humans to freaking lamps probably fear her. To be honest, 𝐿𝐷𝐼𝐴𝐺𝐼𝐻𝐿𝐷 Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. But if we hear one thing we don't think y'all will like, we'll be back. And he'll be gone. The brunette that I'm just going to assume is Jamie said. He just looks like a Jamie. Thank you, I said as they both left. I smiled to myself and turned to Kieran. His eyebrow was raised at me, obviously not impressed by using my mother as a threat. What? I asked, rolling my eyes at him as I walked back up to him. I wrapped my arms around his beautifully sculpted torso, enjoying the feeling of the shocks between us. His arms wound back around me as we stood there for a moment. Your mom is interesting, he said, making me chuckle. I pulled away from him so that I could look at his beaten-up face. Marilyn and her would get along. I chuckled. He nodded, his face still not showing much emotion. That was normal. 𝐿𝐷𝐼𝐴𝐺𝐼𝐻𝐿𝐷 Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. He never showed much of it. Well, what are we gonna? I began. But he interrupted me. Hold on. I've been needing to do this for a while, Kieran said, grabbing me my upper arms and pulling me against him. He leaned down and connected his lips with mine. I melted into him immediately. I missed this. I missed him. Sure, I saw him most days, but not being able to touch him drove me mad. I wanted to deepen the kiss, but he pulled away. My lips tingled, and my face felt hot. His usually emotional face now showed a small smile. I couldn't contain my wicked smile after seeing how happy he was to kiss me for even just a moment. His smile was amazing, and I was happy that I was the one person that could surface that smile. One? I asked, feeling a bit brave. He raised his eyebrows as if questioning me. His smile changed to a smirk, but he didn't make a move to kiss me again. My wolf growled in my head. I could feel how impatient she was getting with her mate. A growl escaped my lips as I grabbed onto the collar of Kieran's shirt. I pulled him down so that his lips connected with mine again. He responded immediately. His hands found their way to my hips, where they sat as he backed me into a wall. I groaned, feeling my back hit the wall. Kieran's hands dug into my hips, making intense shocks spread throughout my body. Our lips moved against each other's in sync. I had no clue if I was kissing him correctly, but I was enjoying it, so I didn't think it mattered. He bit my bottom lip, making my breath catch in my throat as a growl ripped through the room. An intense heat ran through me knowing it was him who growled. My wolf was humming and doing a very strange noise that I honestly cannot explain. It was almost a squeal. I pulled back from Kieran, panting slightly. His eyes were dark. The blood-red color blanketed over top of the green. I placed my hand on his chest lightly. 𝐿𝐷𝐞𝐿 𝐷𝐿. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, 𝐿𝐷𝐞𝐬𝐳. Come back to me, I whispered, knowing he could hear me. His jaw clenched as his eyes slowly returned to their gorgeous green color. I promise I'm going to get us out of here, Kieran stated, staring directly into my eyes, making a heat build up in my chest. I know you will. I never thought that you wouldn't, I assured. We both watched each other for a moment. I wanted so badly to know what he was thinking. That's all I ever wanted to know. I'm only doing this because I love you, Kieran said, breaking me from my thoughts. My heart stopped when he said it. He said it. My wolf remarked giddily. He loves me. I paused and furrowed my brows at him. Doing what? He brought his hands up to my face as he cut my cheeks. I thought he was going in for another kiss. But that was completely wrong. Just as I saw his canines come out, my head was snapped to the sickening crack. Well, that's a shitty way of saying, I love you. Chapter 21, Scar Collection. My eyes slowly peeled open after feeling a very familiar crick in my neck. I groaned and squeezed my eyes shut again, realizing I was back in my own room in my own bed. I must have woken up on the wrong side of the bed, because as soon as I woke up, I felt mad for absolutely no reason. I brought my hands up to rub my sore neck, but regretted it instantly. As soon as my hand hit the base of my neck, tingles shot through my neck and hand. Naturally, I said, not expecting the familiar feeling which caused the crick in my neck to scream out in pain. Oh, I groaned out, squeezing my eyes shut even tighter as I tried ignoring the pain of a broken neck. Who the hell? I asked aloud to literally no one. My eyes snapped open in realization as I remembered everything from what I assumed was yesterday. Kieran snapped my neck. That bitch. I angrily sat up and ripped the sheets off of myself. I was about to charge off of the bed, but I had to take a small break when a crick in my neck thought it was necessary to start hurting again. Once the pain in my neck went away, I stood up off of the bed and made my way to the bathroom. Thankfully, I didn't have to take a break for my neck again. I stopped in front of the mirror and squinted, noticing the way my shirt was sticking to the base of my neck. I pulled away my shirt to reveal something that startled me. No, I was completely thrown off. On the base of my neck was a bite mark. It was obvious that it was a bite mark. You could see all of the teeth indents from the culprit. I didn't know what freaked me out. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing 𝐊𝐢𝐧𝐬𝐷. The fact that you could tell something with very sharp canines had bitten a good portion of my neck, or the fact that the bite mark was completely healed and had already scarred over. I gulped and touched the mark again. I never had a scar. The same tingles shot through me from earlier when my hand came in contact with it, making my wolf hum quite loudly. In that moment, I heard my door open quite swiftly, if I may add. Eli's here. Eli shouted out. Why was he in such a good mood? Darn. Why was I in such a bad one? Pushing away my own thoughts, I walked out of the bathroom and stopped in the doorway with my shirt still tugged down. Eli was standing there with a megawatt smile that disappeared when his eyes landed on me. Well, my neck. Blue eyes widened, and his jaw clenched. I think Kieran bit me, I stated accusingly as I could feel the anger that flooded my system spewing out. Eli walked over to me swiftly. He stopped directly in front of me and pulled the shirt completely away from the Kieran's bite mark. He looked at it intently for a moment before his face turned angry. His jaw clenched even tighter as a growl ripped through the room. It startled me, seeing as I had never seen Eli actually get mad. What do you mean you think he bit you? I could hear the anger in Eli's voice, which made my wolf mad. She growled, which in turn fueled my angry fire that I still had no clue why it was even present. There's a spark, I snapped at him. Got any other people that can cause that besides my mate? Eli glared up at me, obviously not appreciating my tone with him. My features softened, knowing he was only trying to help. I sighed and pulled away from him. I pulled my shirt back up to cover Kieran's bite. When we were training, well, we didn't even really train. I trailed off getting angry, recalling the fact that not only did he bite me, but he snapped my neck, which cut our time together by a lot. Eli looked at me with a face that just screamed, "Will you just get on with the story?" I cleared my throat and touched the bite through the shirt. The sparks were still there, but they were much more subtle. We were talking. I wasn't about to tell my brother that Kieran I had a brief make-out in the training room. He grabbed my face and said something like, "I'm only doing this because I love you." I thought he was going to kiss me, but no. His teeth went all psycho, and he snapped my neck. Then, I woke up with a stiff neck and a huge bite mark. He could have killed me. I shouted, growing angry again. Was he trying to kill me? I can honestly say that the thought of Kieran wanting to kill me hadn't crossed my mind in a while. My angry thoughts were interrupted by Eli's angry growl. The bastard knew exactly what Eli started to say, but stopped when I let out an oomph. An intense feeling came out of nowhere. It felt like someone kicked me in my stomach. I bent over and clutched it. Eli was at my side in a second. His hand was on my shoulder, making sure not to touch the bite. He crouched slightly so that he somewhat matched my height in the position that I was in. "Shit. We have to go," Eli said as he tugged on my arm. I looked up at him and furrowed my brows. Why, I couldn't finish my sentence before another wave of pain rushed over me. This time it was in my head. It made my vision go fuzzy and my ears ring. Whatever it was extremely close to completely knocking me out. A growl ripped through the room. I hadn't even realized it was coming from me until Eli stumbled back a bit. I was overwhelmingly confused by the situation. My wolf wasn't even trying to take over. "What's happening to me?" I cried out as I pressed my hands against my temples, trying to push away the dizziness. "We thought he only snapped your neck." "Mom's livid," Eli said quickly. His hand gripped my wrist as he dragged me out of the room. My feet led me to wherever Eli dragged me. That was until another wave of pain washed over my left leg, making it feel like pins and needles. I dropped to the floor and cried out, gripping my jello leg. Eli spun around and picked me up. I was worried that I was too heavy for him, but that proved to be a stupid thing to worry about. Eli ran through the pack house easily with me in his arms as I gripped whatever limb or part of my body hurt. Another wave of pain hit and rang through my head, causing me to squeeze my eyes shut just as Eli burst through a door. "Stop." I could feel the few rogue tears that left my eyes as the pain kept getting worse. The salty taste of one of them entered my mouth as my lip trembled from the pain in my head. I slowly opened my eyes to see the scene in front of me. Jail. 𝐊𝐢𝐳𝐷 𝐂𝐻𝐃 Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. 𝐊𝐢𝐳𝐷 Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Trevor, a lady with long, dark hair, and Kieran were all in the room. Kieran was sitting on the floor with his back pressed to the wall. My heart ached seeing him as the thoughts of what he had done to me vanished. His lip was busted and bleeding, as was his nose. His black eye was growing even darker and a new bruise was forming on the right side of his jaw. He no longer had a shirt on, so I could clearly see the bruising on his stomach and right pectoral. Alex stood over him angrily. You could see the fire in her eyes as she towered over Kieran's battered form. My jaw clenched seeing Kieran's hands were roped together. It made anger flame within me knowing they were beating him to death. And he couldn't even fight back. Alex had a new scratch on the opposite side of her face from her old scars. It was a pretty deep gash that cut into her cheek. This woman seemed to have a scar collection growing on her face. Yours lip was busted as well. Not as bad as Kieran's, but it certainly looked like it hurt. There were some scratches on his right bicep. One of them trailed its way down to his wrist. Grayson and the girl seemed to be okay, but Trevor had a few scratches on his chest. They weren't entirely visible. They were just managing to peek out through the fabric of his grey shirt. Other than that, Kieran was the only person severely hurt. I could also faintly smell Meryl, and which scared me. What had they done to her in here? Everyone's attention was on Eli and I. I pushed their stares away as I could feel my anger begin to bubble. My wolf was just seconds away from surfacing. She wanted to make sure her mate was okay. I pushed myself out of Eli's grip as all of the pain seemed to disappear from my body. I hadn't even noticed the crick in my neck as I raced over to Kieran. It was honestly the quickest I'd ever ran, and I had a feeling the inhuman speed was coming from my wolf. A growl ripped through the room as I crouched down and held Kieran's bruised face in my hands. I turned to see who it was. 𝐏𝐤 was taking long strides toward Kieran and I until Eli was in front of him. No, Eli shouted at 𝐊𝐢, which seemed to take 𝐊𝐢 back a bit. Eli was angry, and it was obvious that no one ever really saw him mad. 𝐊𝐢𝐳𝐸𝐻𝐿 𝐊𝐢𝐳𝐸𝐻𝐿. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. What Alex started to say before she was interrupted. Worry was laced in her angry tone. He marked her. Eli shot out heavily, my eyes widened hearing Eli's words. I recalled Meryl and briefly telling me about marking from when I had first met the small group of shredders. I hadn't realized marking someone involved biting a chunk of their neck. I turned back to Kieran, feeling my face pale. I expected his beautiful, green eyes to be looking into mine, but they weren't. They were focused on my neck. They were focused on the bite that was just peeking out of the shirt. They were focused on his mark. Kieran marked me. Chapter 22. Calm down, Satan. I was reluctant on leaving Kieran. If anything, I intended on not leaving him at all. I had basically tried to attach myself to him so that no one could take me away from him again. That didn't quite work. I was eventually pulled away from Kieran, but it was not easy. It took 5 men, including 𝐊𝐢 and my father, to get me out of whatever abuse room we were in. Kieran tried keeping me from being hauled away, but he could only do so much. His hands were literally tied. With a lot of manpower and a sedative, I was eventually moved back to my room where I woke up. I had basically set up camp once again in my room. I was being petty, I know, but I couldn't help my anger. Not only was I mad, but so was my wolf. I didn't know what was wrong with me. Ever since Kieran gave me his stupid bite, I haven't been myself. I was 10 times more on edge with everything. I felt tired, angry, and I snapped at Eli more times in the past 2 days than I can count. Honestly, I had contemplated ripping apart this pack apart, one werewolf at a time. Alex attempted making conversation with me, but I just ignored her. 𝐿𝐢𝐳𝐸𝐻𝐿 𝐊𝐢𝐳𝐸𝐻𝐿. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing enthusiasm. I just shut the door in her face. I've been getting a bit more confident in my actions toward her and, well, everyone. Since then, Eli has been the only one coming up to see me, no matter how many times I act rudely toward him or just blatantly ignore him. I even tossed a lamp at him, which he dodged, by the way. I chuckled of the small lamp missing his head by just mere centimeters, making his blue eyes narrow at me. I growled at him and matched his stare. Eli rolled his eyes and shook his head, looking away from me. He stood up off of my bed and started walking towards the door before pausing. You know, Eli stated, turning back to look at me, just because you can feel Kieran's irritability through that mark doesn't mean you have to express it. His tone was cold, making my eyebrows knit together. What are you talking about? Something must have clicked in his brain as his angry expression softened. He sighed and ran his hand through his brown hair. I watched him closely as he made his way back over to the bed and sat down. Okay, he started as he looked at the very visible bite mark on my neck. That's a mark. I scoffed and rolled my eyes at him. Eli, I'm not a goddamn idiot. I never said you were. Eli interrupted me, making me sigh out of annoyance. Then again, you're a werewolf who has no idea what the meaning of a mark is. I know what a mark is. I snapped, feeling even more anger rise through my body. Anger that I didn't even understand why I had. Eli raised his right brow at me, waiting for an explanation. It's a 𝐾𝐥𝐵 symbol or something. It shows like, hey, my mate is an alpha. Fight me. Eli was obviously not impressed by my explanation. You just insulted the moon goddess and mates everywhere, he said with all seriousness, making me glare. A mark isn't just some status symbol. Gray. A mark ties you to someone. It connects you with your other half in ways that humans will never understand. A mark allows you to feel your mate's every emotion. Their pain. Everything. He spoke so passionately. He looked lost in thought for a moment before his gaze settled back on me. Kieran's mark isn't just some bond to you. That mark is a warning to every other male who may feel the want to mate you himself. I grimaced in disgust. Why would anyone want to take another werewolf's mate? I asked, not fully understanding the ludicrous statement. Why would a werewolf want to steal another wolf's mate when he is his or her own, judging by Kieran's mark? I highly doubt you'll be having to worry about that. Eli mumbled. My eyes narrowed on him, silently asking him what he was talking about. Male wolves mark their mate as a way of showing their claim on them. The mark doesn't possess any magical qualities that keep other guys away, but it does show how strong the wolf is that you'll be fighting with over said mate. Eli pointed to a spot on my mark, where the color was much deeper than the rest of the scar. I knew it was where Kieran's canines were, seeing as how there were 3 other spots just like it. A male wolf's canines are one of his most valued traits. The bigger the canines, the bigger the bite. Based on this, Eli said, motioning to my mark, Kieran could rival y'all if he wanted to, and honestly there's a good chance Kieran would win. Pride swelled within me knowing that my mate was strong. Of course he was. He's an alpha. My alpha? You really think that? He nodded with a blank expression. I do. We sat there for a moment in silence. Neither of us really knew what to say. I just sat there trying to contemplate it all. It made sense now. My anger wasn't really my anger. It was Kieran's. I was feeling his emotions through the mark. The pain I was feeling before wasn't actually my pain. It was Kieran's too. The flashes of confidence, hatred, and even just the sheer want to murder everyone. They weren't my own emotions. They were all Kieran's. I was literally the other half of Kieran. Kieran would never hurt me. I spoke up. Eli said. Blue eyes scanned over my face before making their way to the mark. I know he wouldn't. Then why won't they let me see him? I asked as obvious hatred spilled from my lips. Eli's eyes snapped back up to my face and stared me dead in the eyes. You do understand he snapped your neck? Right. He snapped at me. I leaned away from his glare. I could feel the hatred that had been bottled inside of me for the past few days slowly morph into fear. I still was not used to seeing Eli mad. Out of my entire family, he seemed like the only one actually in control of his emotions, including me. Well, I mean, he's never tried to hurt anyone. Lie, that's a lie. And I knew it. He literally killed someone in front of me, but she tried killing me, so that means it doesn't count. Right. Eli gave me an angry look that just screamed, Are you freaking kidding me? He almost killed Mom. Eli shouted, throwing up his hands. I leaned back again when his right hand was just a few inches away from hitting my face. He attacked her. Y'all and Dad. Mom could have died. What are you talking about? I shouted back at him, his eyes dark, and as he stood up off of the bed. Mom was the first one into the training room. She heard it. She literally heard him snap your neck. She found you lying there with him standing over you. She thought he killed you. Eli was obviously livid, but he was obviously upset too. He was getting so mad that I could see the angry tears glazing over his eyes. I didn't know what to say. I couldn't help but sympathize with my family. My mate who everyone already fears because he's some dangerous, killing, machine werewolf snapped my neck. I can see how bad that would look even if it wasn't entirely the truth. I'm perfectly fine, I said quietly, but it came out blunt and, well, mean, if anything, mate not happy. I frowned as the words of my wolf swam around in my mind. Great. Now I can't control my wolf and Kieran's feelings that I'm bound to feel no matter what. Perfect. Well, why not tell that to Mom? You've been ignoring her for days. All that she wants to know is that you're okay. Eli spat angrily, but his icy blue eyes betrayed his words. His eyes were still glazed over, and I could tell just how much of a toll all of this was taking on him. I wanted to hug him, but at the same time I didn't. Thanks to Kieran's emotions mixing with mine. I also felt the need to shout at him again and make him cry. I knew that Alex just wanted to speak to me and make sure I was okay. I didn't really care. 𝐊𝐢𝐳𝐷𝐞𝐝 𝐊𝐢𝐳 heartfelt thanks for your unfailing 𝐊𝐢𝐳𝐷𝐞𝐝. Well, for the past few days I didn't. Kieran's hatred toward my mother was seeping through the mark. My wolf wasn't really helping. 𝐊𝐢𝐳𝐷𝐞𝐝 𝐊𝐢𝐳 heartfelt thanks for your unfailing 𝐊𝐢𝐳𝐷𝐞𝐝. Fine, I growled out through clenched teeth. I stared up at Eli, and his face softened as an angry tear rolled down my cheek. In all honesty, I hadn't even realized I was this close to crying until now. I'll talk to Alex. I'll go down to dinner tonight and make conversation there. But you're taking me to see them afterward. Thank you. Eli left my room after that. I decided instead of sitting in my bed for another 4 hours, I would go get a shower. I turned the water up to a boiling heat which I didn't bother turning down. I just took in and embraced the pain until my body got used to the feeling. I got out, brushed my teeth, and did all of the other necessary stuff that I had done just hours ago when I woke up. I threw on a pair of cropped black leggings and a plain grey tank top along with a sports bra and underwear. I ignored putting on any socks. I always hated socks. Dinner was okay, quiet, but okay. Alex was surprised to see me sitting at the dinner table, and I'm pretty sure I even saw Grayson crack a smile. That was until he saw the mark and his usual scowl returned. Stiletta gave me a warm smile all through dinner. And Jarl was Jarl. He grunted once or twice. Eli was pretty quiet. 𝐿𝐢𝐳𝐷𝐞𝐝 𝐊𝐢𝐳 heartfelt thanks for your unfailing 𝐊𝐢𝐳𝐷𝐞𝐝. It worried me, but I think it was his way of telling me to talk to Alex because he wasn't going to. Alex made casual conversation. Grayson even tried joining in, but then someone would bring up something that he didn't seem fond of, and he would just shut down again. It was obvious Grayson wasn't much of the best friend. But I could be wrong. Maybe he just not my daughter's mated to a shred of that try-killing my mate person. I suppose I'll never know. You've got 5 minutes, Eli said, sticking the key into the lock of the door. The guards will be back in about 15. Use your time wisely. Grey. He pushed the door open for me, allowing me to see the familiar grey and silver cells. With a grateful smile, I walked past Eli into the cellar. Oh look, it's the marked maiden. Bolton muttered from his cell as I neared them. Hey princess, he greeted with a smirk. I growled lowly at him for using that nickname. Only Kieran gets to call me those things. Someone's feisty. Bolton joked, holding his hands up in mocking surrender. I ignored him and the strong urge that I had to beat him with his own hands and looked into Kieran's cell hoping to find him. He wasn't there. Where is he? I shot out quickly, turning back to Bolton. They locked him up in another room for the time being. Surprised you couldn't feel his loneliness, Bolton said, making me go rigid. I could feel his anger. That's why I was so mad. That's why I felt the need to come down here and scream at him for marking me while I was unconscious. That's why I felt the need to literally rip this pack apart. I brought my hand up to the mark and rubbed it. Speaking of, I turned to Marilyn with angry eyes. She watched me with a bored expression. You never mentioned this part of having a mark. Well, sorry little Lunar. I didn't exactly have the chance to receive one. Marilyn snapped at me. Bolton chuckled a bit from the cell directly beside hers. That's not true. Bolton pressed, looking at Marilyn with a cocky smirk. What do you mean? I asked, looking at Bolton, then Marilyn, and then back to Bolton. Marilyn let out a sigh and then rolled her eyes. I had a mate, she stated, making my eyes grow. Marilyn having a mate? That's unthinkable. I asked, walking directly in front of her cell. I wanted to grip onto the bars, but knew that wouldn't do anything but burn the palms of my poor hands. Like 2 years ago, she said, looking at Bolton in a questioning way. He then gave her a nod. Well, what happened to him? Marilyn groaned as she ran her hands down her face. Do you ever stop with the questions? I shook my head. No, I never really grew up with many answers. Tut, she muttered. Well, his name was Jonah. He was a biter and a great kisser. she said with a small smile playing on her lips. She pauses for a moment. The smile stayed plastered to her lips as she stared at the floor below my feet, and I pressed, making her snarl at me. Will you relax? I'm getting there. She snapped at me once again, moving her gaze from the floor to look directly into my grey eyes. I nodded and decided it was best to just shut my mouth. Even though she was locked inside of the cell, I still feared she would break through the bars and throw me down the hallway like a rag doll. To my agent extraordinaire, 𝐷𝐸, heartfelt thanks for your unfading patience and enthusiasm. My pretty little beta refused to let me join his pack, and he refused to leave, she stated coldly. Her jaw clenched and her abnormally non-manicured nails tapped on the floor. I would have done anything for him. I would have been civilized, but he didn't think so. He led me on, and then rejected me. Her eyes were trained on the cold, cellar floors. I gulped, not knowing what to say. I'd never seen Meryl and quite this upset over something. You could tell inside her head she was livid, maybe even a bit sad. But she did a great job of keeping composed. I was so addicted to the way his mouth tasted when he kissed me. I felt there wasn't a damn thing that could ever compare to it, she said as a smile slowly made its way to her lips. Her dark brown eyes still stayed trained to the floor. I was wrong, she chuckled, looking up at me with a viscous smile. His blood tasted a hell of a lot better. I gaped at Marilyn in horror. I stumbled backward away from her a bit as Bolton mumbled, "Calm down, Satan." My back hit the silver bars on the cell behind me, making me yell and lurch forward. "You killed your mate," I shouted a bit too loudly. I just prayed that no one heard me. I tried to ignore the burning in certain parts of my back where the silver was able to make contact with my skin. The tank top I was wearing had not managed to cover much of the top section of my back, which I could only assume was burned pretty harshly, even though I'd only made contact with the silver for a split second. "He broke my heart," she stated, covering her heart with her hand. Her face displayed sadness, but her eyes were deceiving. Her dark eyes showed not one bit of remorse for what she had done to the poor boy. So I ripped his out. Bolton looked over at her with a sigh. "Great. You know what? Just don't listen to me next time. Satan," Bolton barked. "Look." She scared shitless. "Way to go." He motioned to me with his hand. I stuttered. "Gray, let's go." Eli hollered at me from the door. I looked up the hall to see him peek his head through the door. "I have to go," I said quickly, not looking at either Marilyn or Alton. I kept my eyes trained on Eli. "I'll be back. I swear. Bring me some food next time, princess. I'm literally starving," Bolton shouted at me as I began walking to Eli. Yay. To my agent extraordinaire, 𝐷𝐸, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I mumbled, pushing open the door the rest of the way. Eli gave me a worried look, noticing my expression. The door shut loudly behind me. Kieran wasn't there, I said quietly. I could feel the color draining from my face as I spoke. Who knew what they were doing to him? Eli looked genuinely confused. "What do you mean?" "I mean what I said, Eli," I shouted, not caring if anyone heard me. I was panicking. "They said he's in some room." Eli's eyes wide and making my heart drop. What were they doing to him? "He's in Lock 9. Eli mumbled. "He's gonna lose his mind in there." "You have to take me to him," I answered quickly. Eli shook his head. "Gray, I can't. Wolves go crazy in Lock 9. My Kieran isn't dangerous," I stated, staring Eli dead in the eye. Kieran would never do anything to jeopardize the safety of his pack, and he would never do anything to jeopardize my safety. Mate not happy. Chapter 23, Panic. And 𝐊𝐢𝐬𝐷𝐸 did not agree on taking me to see Kieran. Every time that I asked, he would ignore my plea and just say how unsafe the situation was. Eli wouldn't tell me what Lock 9 was. To my agent extraordinaire, 𝐷𝐸, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. All that I knew of it was that whatever treatment the wolves go under in the room causes them to come out crazy, totally psychotic to the point that they oftentimes kill themselves. 𝐿𝐈 assured me twice that Kieran would not be tortured as far as wanting to kill himself, but based on how 𝐿𝐈 seemed so reluctant on letting me go down to Loch 9, I couldn't find it within myself to believe him. I decided after 3 hours of begging and not getting a change of opinion from 𝐿𝐈, that I would just be trooper and find Loch 9 myself. This only resulted in Trevor hauling me back to my room. I made it all the way down to the cellar floor by myself when he caught me trying to creep past the interrogation room. Luckily, he only gave me a warning saying that he made a promise to keep me safe. I assume that he knew by telling Alex and Grayson that I would be in heaps of trouble, but I still don't completely understand his reasoning. If he told my parents, then I would be in trouble, not in danger. I didn't push it. To my agent extraordinaire, 𝐿𝐈, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I really didn't need them knowing. 𝐿𝐈 found out. To my agent extraordinaire, 𝐿𝐈, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. He gave me a lecture about how much of an idiot I am. That didn't stop me from trying to go down and try to find Loch 9 again. 𝐿𝐈 stopped me as I was just about to enter the cellar floor, and I soon realized that I was definitely not going to let anyone stop me from seeing Kieran. First of all, I needed to make sure he was okay. Second, I needed to know what Loch 9 was. The not knowing was eating me alive. Thankfully, I can count on Elijah to be a nice, helpful big brother and get me down to see Kieran. Note the sarcasm. No, but in all honesty, with my new vote of confidence thanks to Kieran and his mark, I straight up told 𝐿𝐈 that he could lock me away like freaking Rapunzel, and I would still try to find a way to see Kieran. Much to my pleasure and 𝐿𝐈's displeasure, 𝐿𝐈 didn't take any chances with my threat bluff placing us in our current situation. It's probably about 4 in the morning. I want to say, I already knew most pack members would be asleep except for the unlucky few who had border patrol. Other than that, the entire house was pretty much silent. Pack house curfew was at 11 p.m, and pack members could not disrupt the peace until 9 a.m. This ultimately meant that you just watch reruns of really old shows like Hannah Montana and iCarly in your room until like 1. Pass out, wake up, creep downstairs, and silently watch the news until 9, where you can then begin to actually breath. I followed 𝐿𝐈 through the cellar floor, but instead of heading directly to the cells holding Marilyn and Bolton, we made a right that led us to an entirely new door, which then opened up to another hallway. The hallway itself wasn't long. There were 2 doors halfway down the hall, one on the left and one on the right. I led us into the one on the right and began rummaging around in a cabinet. The room was bland as could be, with grey walls and greyish-looking chairs. Metal desks sat in the room, as well as a black metal cabinet that 𝐿𝐈 was currently digging through. Where the hell I know 𝐿𝐈 𝐿𝐈 murmured to himself. He turned around to face me with a look that I was all too familiar with. It was his "I can't believe I'm actually helping you do this" look. I rolled my eyes and took notice of the objects in his hands. Earplugs? I questioned, staring at the fancy high-tech looking earplugs. No, he drug out. Well, kind of. He handed a pair of kind of earplugs to me, which I greedily took. I examined the small gadgets, understanding what he meant by they were kind of earplugs. It was obvious that you shoved the 2 contraptions in your ears, but they didn't look like that's all they were for. They almost reminded me of a hearing aid, as strange as it sounds. Kind of. I questioned, putting them in my ears as he did the same. Yeah, he replied as he quickly reached over to my kind of earplugs and switched something on. Kind of. His lips portrayed, but no sound was heard. I jumped, not expecting for all of my hearing to completely shut off. I yanked one of the buds out of my ears. I furrowed my brows as my eyes did a once-over of the earplug before returning back to 𝐿𝐈. He chuckled slightly. I turned the sensitivity the entire way down. Don't worry, just did it to freak you out. He jerked as he did something to the bud in my ear. Instantly, I could hear again, but everything was very faint. He took the bud in my hand and turned some sort of tiny dial before handing it back to me. I slowly put the bud back into my ear. It gave the same dull, distant hearing as my other ear. Why are these relevant? I asked, furrowing my brows together. You see, he said just loud enough that I could hear him. I wanted to ask if he was on drugs or something. But as he opened the door on the left, I knew immediately why we needed them. I scrunched my face up in annoyance, hearing a very irritating ring. I looked over to Eli to see him messing with the dial on his earplugs, obviously finding the ring obnoxious as well. Out of sheer curiosity, I decided to take one of the buds out, which was a completely stupid idea. The ringing intensified by what seemed like 10,000. My eardrum immediately went into a panic, and all that I could hear was the loud squealing noise that permeated the hallway that Eli and I stood in. I hurriedly shoved the bud back into my ear, wishing I hadn't taken it out in the first place. As we entered through the door, my courier was ringing, and it was making my head hurt. Yeah, Eli shouted at me over the ringing as he quietly shut the door. I wouldn't take those out. No kidding. It's extremely painful to our sensitive hearing, he stated, tapping a finger to his plugged ear. It plays 24/7, all day, all night. One of the many awful elements to Lock 9. So we're in Lock 9? I asked, not even sure if I sounded like myself. I could barely hear myself talking. I looked around me just as Eli shook his head. No, this is just the hallway leading to it. It's worse in Lock 9. I frowned, as did Eli. If I could barely handle it in here, I couldn't imagine why Kieran must be going through. Eli led us down the hallway through another door, the ringing then intensified by a million, which brought us face to face with another door. The door was completely made of metal, but it had a clear little window in about the center of it. I slowly walked up to the window and peeked inside. My heart sank. It took about 3 seconds for Kieran to look up at me. He was sitting with his legs crossed on the floor, his head facing the windowless wall ahead of him as his fist clenched and unclenched. He then turned to face me. Immediately, I wanted to cry. There were extremely obvious bags under his eyes. His hair was completely disheveled, and I could see from where I was standing that there was a red tint to his eyes. His face still covered with a mass of cuts and bruises, and his body was stiff. As fast as it took him to look at me, he was at the door, his inhuman speed startling me. He slammed his hands against the door repeatedly as he bent down to stare at me through the small window. I could then see just how blood-red his green eyes really were. The dark, couple bags were even more evident now up close. They contrasted with his now pale skin, which made him look sickly. The fact that it was obvious he hasn't eaten in days not helping the situation much either. Get her out, Kieran snarled as he beat on the door. The banging was so loud that I could hear every beat his hands made on the door. I could hear his words as if he were shouting them directly in my ear. I jumped back as tears made their way to my eyes. Out, get her out. Kieran's eyes dark and in color as his canines poked through. He continued slamming his hands on the door and shouting quite loudly, Kieran, stop. I screamed through tears. I couldn't help but cry. Stop, please. He didn't. 𝐿𝐸𝐴𝐷𝐞𝐝𝐿. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. He just kept pounding his hands on the metal door. A viscous snarl or growl would make an appearance as well every once in a while. 𝐿𝐸𝐴𝐷𝐞𝐝𝐿. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Arden, get out of here. I want her out. 𝐿𝐸𝐴𝐷𝐞𝐝𝐿. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Please. I sobbed as I backed away from the door and chest. Kieran continued viciously banging on the door as Eli wrapped his arms around me. I cried loud as Eli just held me to him. No. Kieran, no. The whole situation was one that I was not expecting. I'm sure if I showed up seeing Kieran dead it wouldn't be as painful as this. He didn't want me here. He didn't want me. Leave. Kieran snarled again, causing another sob from me. Gray. Come on, Eli urged as he tried pulling me toward the door. Why? I shouted back at Kieran as tears poured down my cheeks. You don't want me anymore. This made Kieran stop, his tired eyes wide, and as his hands stopped slamming on the door. his green eyes that were swarming with familiar traces of red scanned my face quickly. His body went rigid. He gulped and shook his head, all while his eyes were still staring directly into mine. "I'm only doing this for you," he said in what sounded like a whisper. Then, as if we had never had this moment, his hand slammed back down on the door as another animalistic snarl ripped through the air. "Get out." I didn't even have a say in what was happening. Eli literally lifted me up and swiftly carried me out of the room. I could still hear Kieran's banging and snarling until Eli shut the door. As soon as the large door closed, the only noise heard was the obnoxious ringing. I looked up at Eli as my bottom lip trembled. I shook my head, not believing what just happened. He watched me with sorrow-filled eyes. "No, no, no," I cried as I wrapped my arms around Eli's torso and cried into his chest. "They ruined him. That's not my Kieran," I shouted as I continued to cry. Eli comfortingly rubbed my back. "Gray, don't worry, they broke him." "What did they do?" I don't even think Eli could quite understand. My entire body was shaking like crazy, and my head was pounding. "Mate not happy. Of course he's not. Stupid," I shouted back at my wolf, not caring that Eli probably thought I was insane. "When is he ever happy? Mate needs us." "No, he doesn't. He doesn't want you. He doesn't want me. He doesn't want either of us. Gray, mate not happy. I'm not happy. Will you just go away? Leave me alone," I shouted, pushing my palms to my temples. Suddenly, my hands were ripped away from my head. I stared up at Eli, who was watching me with an extremely worried expression plastered across his face. "Gray, calm down," he shouted at me, obviously not knowing what else to do, seeing as how I ignored all of his other pleas. I stuttered. My breathing was heavy, and my head was thumping rather loudly. "Kieran, I don't want to do this anymore." More tears trailed down my cheeks. Eli wiped them away. "I'll make sure he's back in his cell by tonight." "Gray, please, don't cry," Eli begged, wiping away more of my tears. "I'm here. You're okay. Everything is going to be okay," he soothed. I shook my head. "As long as we're still here, nothing's ever going to be okay." Eli kept his promise. That afternoon, Kieran was placed back into his cell.